My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and I'm here with Gemma Lonsdale. So she is a globally recognized prophet, spiritual leader, and inspirational speaker known for her powerful prophetic insight and authentic approach to faith and personal growth. After navigating 2 battles with cancer, a marriage separation, and a profound spiritual awakening, Gemma stepped boldly into her prophetic calling. She now helps others deepen their connection with the divine, understand their true purpose, and align with their most authentic selves. Through her growing platforms on YouTube and TikTok, Gemma reaches a global audience with prophetic messages, spiritual guidance, and practical teaching. She's passionate about helping people break free from societal structures and encouraging them to explore and strengthen their faith in a way that fits them. Gemma's message is about more than faith. It's about empowering people to grow into the most authentic and powerful version of themselves. So a big welcome to the show, Gemma.
Hi, it is so good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining me. There is so much to unpack in that
Yeah.
short journey you went on.
Honestly, I'm still recovering from it myself. Yeah, and so much happened in such a short space of time, and then I was just thrust onto like a new path. It was crazy.
Sometimes when, you're meant to be on your spiritual journey and the universe really wants you to be on it, right? It will just throw you in such a dramatic fashion. That's the only way I can
Yeah.
describe it. It just throws you in, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what happened? It's been a couple
Yeah.
of months and I don't even know who I am anymore. So, did you want to share a little bit about the highlights of that journey?
Well, it's funny because I recorded something on YouTube recently that talked about cancer being my greatest gift, which sounds really odd. Like, it sounds like a very strange thing to be saying, oh, cancer was amazing. Like, it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. I had this one week where me and my husband had just decided to separate from my ex-husband because we're no longer together. And I'd found somewhere new to live. And then I can remember I'd found a lump in my breast. And I was 34. I didn't think it would be anything. Like, I'm 34. What are the odds? The doctor didn't think it was anything. So I went along to the appointment to get a scan done just to make sure. And I left that day in tears because I knew that it was cancer. So I was completely caught off guard. And I was very embedded in the material world. I was very driven. I wanted the big house, the fancy holidays. It was all about the possessions. And I had just got a brand new car the day before. It was the first new car that I'd ever had. It was a BMW 3 Series Sport. This car had been custom built to my specification, and I was thinking, gosh, I'll be like driving around and everybody will know, oh, she's somebody, she's achieving. And I remember I got it on one day, and then the next day I was sitting in it thinking, gosh, am I even going to be alive by the time this lease is finished with this car? It seemed so ridiculous that I had put so much effort into the material stuff. And that was my baptism of fire into my spiritual journey.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so funny, hey, when we put so much stock in the material measurements of success when it actually doesn't fulfill
Hmm.
your soul at all, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that, this is just that flip for you, and it would have been exactly that moment. And you're like,
Yeah.
do I even care about this car anymore? Not really. I just want to
No.
live.
Yeah, it was so crazy, and I think even after that, I still was gripping on to the comfort of my life as I know it, because I couldn't really see, well, how can I leave the job that I really am not feeling fulfilled by and still find a way to sustain myself financially? And the universe just had this way of putting everything on my path, that everything happened exactly in the best way possible. And that didn't mean that I was always able to pay my bills, but it meant that right up until the last moment of maybe that I was going to get evicted or whatever it might have been, something would have come and I would have had that pot of money in order to pay. So I was always taken care of. It just didn't mean that I was always financially abundant at that time, because I was being taught how to trust in a higher power. I was being inducted into my spiritual gifts. I'd started to hear things and see things. So I was having that induction. I was going through this healing journey where I was just crying constantly, talking to my wall, because that was like my self therapy, when I'm self questioning and just literally talking to the space in front of me. And it was this incredible journey of transformation. That's the only way that I can say it, where I completely changed my world around and changed who I was as a person. Really, I discovered things about myself that I didn't even know before. I've got to know myself so much more deeply and realize that actually the fulfillment that I'm going to have for myself is always going to come from inside of me and from having a connection with a higher power, something that I never had before. So I was in the mindset of, well, I'm not happy, I'm not fulfilled, so I just need more stuff. I need to
Yeah.
earn more money, and that was never going to work. And I realize that now, but at the time, I didn't realize what it was that was missing. I knew something was missing, but everything that I was doing outside of myself was just a distraction. It was never actually solving the issue, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes complete sense because I built up two companies and I was never happy. And everyone was always telling me, your job must be so satisfying because I worked with children as a speech language pathologist, right? I
Hmm.
helped kids talk. And I was like, no, I'm not fulfilled. I'm not fulfilled. And, up to the very last moment, before I left the profession, I was like numbing myself to tell myself I was okay. But my part of my spiritual awakening was selling my company, which was essentially my baby. And my husband had been telling me for months to sell it. And I probably should have sold it when he told me to sell it. But I just took me a bit longer to catch up, because you have to go through the journey. You have to be ready to, you have to,
Yeah,
exactly as you said, you have to do it in the timing that is right for you and right for your soul.
yeah,
And I find to,
exactly.
the more you ignore it, the more it really hurts you in the long term, because you just look back and go, oh, I don't know why I didn't do that sooner.
Yeah, because we grip on because it's a comfort thing. It's all that we
Hmm.
know. So the unknown, even though we're not satisfied where we're at, the unknown feels so much scarier sometimes. So we just stick within that comfort zone of being unfulfilled and stagnation. And it's bizarre, isn't it, how our minds work? But we want the logical thing. We want the logical thing that we can see, because we haven't had the chance to build up that faith and in the things that we can't see, and trusting that everything will work out for us.
Yep, currently going through that at the moment when we're recording this, so I understand completely what the trust is. You know, but at the same time, whenever I've done something extremely crazy from everyone else's point of view, but it's what my soul has whispered, it's always healed something in my body. Like it's always shifted a pain that no one could shift or healed something that no one could heal. Like, and I'm very alternative. I'll go to like all these different people, whoever I get pulled to talk to, and they'll give me another piece of the puzzle, another piece of the puzzle. But really, the main person that solves it is your own intuition and trusting what comes from within.
Yeah. I know no one is ever going to be able to give us the answers to the questions that we have. And, one of the big things that I have found with the people that I work with, whenever they're asking people for advice, it's usually either that they don't trust themselves to make that choice, or they already know what they should be doing. And it's almost like they're seeking permission. They want a permission slip from somebody to say, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. And that will just give them the confidence that they need to step onto the path. But whenever we ask other people, it really erodes that inner trust that we've got, however little it might be. So we're really taking away from that every single time we ask another person for, well, what do you think I should do? What would you do in this situation? And we're asking for advice and we're seeking guidance, but they're never going to know exactly what is on our path and what our soul is being pulled towards. So that's why self trust is so important. It's that internal satellite navigation system that will always keep us on the right path. And it will often defy logic and have us doing things that people will look at us and think, well, you are just crazy. But it will always take us in the right direction, always.
Yeah, and the most beautiful thing about that too, and that self-trust, like you were saying, is it's almost like you're giving away your power when you want someone else to validate how you're feeling or that intuitive pull of what's happening within you. And at the same time, it's still nice when you think you're going crazy and then the universe will give you a sign or give you a message through somebody or something, and you go, I am not crazy. This is actually
Yeah.
happening.
I know. You think though, like right from school age, we're not taught to trust in our intuition. We're taught to, show the working out and to trust the logic. And well, you've come up with this for the math equation. How did you come up with this? It's never a case of, oh, I feel it. I feel it. It's always, let's look at the science, let's look at the working out. So we're taught from a very young age that actually our inner knowing isn't really that important, and we're not given an emphasis on trusting our intuition. And it's just about figuring that journey back to ourselves, I think.
Exactly. And, I like teach a lot of my clients like a simple muscle testing thing to help them tap into their own intuition and trust it again, because often, you just need something for your brain to hold on to until you
Mhm.
learn to trust that inner voice or that inner scene or inner knowing, whatever it ends up being. And it was funny, I was talking to a client slash friend the other day, and she's when she was really little, she used to be able to astral plane a lot in her dreams and also could see a lot of things clairvoyantly. And she lost that somewhere along the way, and she goes, why? And I looked into it. I said, it's actually like you had a massive trauma and you just shut it off. I said, there's like so much energy around that. I said, you can open it again, but it'll be like at some point. I said, but I don't know. And then we kept talking, and she was saying, I just have this really good intuition, like I just know things. Like, I was talking to my partner, and he's saying, oh, guess what I'm eating? And she goes, I just knew what it was. And I was like, that's claircognizance, right? That's a clear knowing. She's like, oh, I have a clair. I was like, everyone has clairs. And she just, because she was so looking just for that clairvoyance that she
Yeah.
forgot to look for the other things too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, well, I feel a lot of people don't realize that we all have clairs. It's just you have to tune in and realize what's going on, especially claircognizance is the hardest one because it's like you just have this deep knowing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. So I spent all of my career was in the corporate world before I went all woo woo, and I was a
Yes.
recruiter and a headhunter. So that was what I was doing from I was like 21. I joined a graduate scheme, and then that was me on that path. And we used to do a lot of headhunting where we would have a client that was just working with us exclusively or retained, and then we would do the shortlisting and we would put the people in for interview rather than sending like the CVs or the resumes to the client. And I used to always know who would get the job. sometimes even before I had interviewed the person myself, like just off their CV. So I had experienced all of that and knowing things. And even whenever I would have been interviewing somebody, it was like their words were telling me things, but I was picking up all of the information that they weren't saying. And I used to be very, very efficient at my job. Like we were monitored on, how many candidates we had to interview in order to get a placement. And I was always very, very good at knowing my people and getting the conversions. Because I just had this intuition. But I had never thought that I was different to anyone else because I wasn't aware of my spiritual gifts at that stage. But it was quite funny. There's two parts to this point. There's two parts to this story. My
I'm excited.
boss used to always dismiss this intuition. He was just like, no, this person's rubbish. He would have looked at their interview notes, and we had a card that we would have completed. And he would have looked at their interview notes and been like, no, this person isn't right for this job. They're never going to get it. I'm not even putting them in for interview. And then something would happen that somebody would drop out last minute, or my boss would be off in the sick, and then I'd just sort of sort it out and put this person in, and they always got the job. And one of the other managers actually said to him, like, why are you not listening to her? She clearly has something where she knows the information. Now, I had spent a good 7 or 8 years, I think it was, in the recruitment world, and I had left it briefly and then I went back. And I had lost my ability to do that. My
Interesting.
intuition wasn't working as much. And one of the things that I had noticed whenever I tried to work out what had happened, it was the more I had become focused on hitting targets and earning commission, and the more embedded I was within the material world, the less intuitive I had become. So it was almost like I had lost my superpower, and it was very frustrating for me. And I still wasn't aware at that stage that I was spiritually gifted, and just didn't really know why it wasn't working anymore. And then it was only whenever I had my awakening and started to experience things that I realized, wow, what I was experiencing whenever I was doing my recruitment job was the claircognizance. It was
Mm,
always there. So you're absolutely right. Everybody has clairs. It's just how well they're attuned to them. Even whenever we meet someone for the first time, everybody will make that snap judgment. They'll pick up on the energy. They'll think, are they a good person? Are they a bad person? That is a clair. Like, just the ability to do that is a spiritual gift. It's just how much you're going to lean into that and how much trust you're going to put on it will depend on how much more in tune you become with it. But we all have the ability to do that. That's why I think it's so crazy when people say, well, I don't believe in spiritual gifts. I don't, but they're actively using it all the time. It's just on a subconscious. They haven't thought about it. They've tuned in and just moved on with their life.
and I love so much of that journey. And it's almost like your claircognizance when you were first in that recruitment role was almost letting you to be prophetic in itself, right? Because you could predict who was going to get the job when everyone else was like, oh, no way, that person's never going to get that job. And all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're going, no, 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 it's this person. You like you said, you knew before you interviewed them, you just knew, you
Yeah.
just had this knowing, right? and and also that when you came back and you had that break, you were attached to the outcome, weren't you? Like it
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah.
and and a lot of people don't realize that when you become really attached to the outcome of something, it's never going to work out. And it's often, when we did like put it to the side, that then you'll get all the answers. So I was
Yeah.
thinking, I was working on this project and I'm like, why am I putting my attention on this? I'm going to put it to the side. And as soon as I did that, I got all these opportunities to go back and work on it. And I was like, okay, universe, thank you.
It's crazy. Yeah, and sometimes we do just need to just take our foot off the gas and not think about it, and it just all falls into position.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So then how did you start to get prophetic memory? No, I want to say memory. I don't know why I wanted to say
Well,
memories, and
it was
that's weird.
Isn't that weird? Well, I was going through all of that purging and I had been getting ringing in my ears. I felt really called to getting a deck of tarot cards. Had no idea what I was doing, but I'll be honest, I was obsessed by some guy I had met that I was convinced was my future partner. And I thought it was the man that I was going to be with. And I was doing the tarot cards, like trying to figure out why has he not asked me out again? Why is nothing happening? What's going on in his life? So I was in my crazy stage. And it was in that moment, the very first person I connected to was a man. Whenever I was trying to figure out what's going on in this guy's love life, why is he, not coming towards me? And this man connected to me, and it was as though I instinctively knew how to communicate, and I knew what he was telling me through the visions, and I was hearing words. And he was telling me that he knew this guy, had known him when he was small and had held him as a baby, but wasn't there to see him grow up. I could see him fully. And whenever I actually said to the guy, look, this is what has happened. I have a spiritual gift. This man has come. This is what he looks like. This is what he's telling me. And he said, that's my uncle. You've just described my uncle. He died whenever I was young. That was my very, very first experience of that. And I didn't really have much else. I was getting visions, but it was more spiritual guidance for myself and for whoever I was reading for. But I had to always use cards of some description. And then it got to the stage where I'd been thinking to myself that I could really connect with a celebrity. And I wanted to connect with someone, and I kept thinking about Patrick Swayze. And I'm sitting thinking to myself, what celebrities do I know or can I think of who, are no longer here? And I love Dirty Dancing, and Patrick
Same.
Swayze was the one that kept coming into my head. And I sort of sat and I'm sitting trying to, like, I don't know, conjure a spirit or something, and nothing happened. And I can remember dropping my daughter off to her dad's house one day, and his granddad had just randomly come through, and I didn't have any cards with me. And I sat and I gave him about 30 minutes worth of information just by talking to this spirit person. And that was the first time that had ever happened where I was completely unsupported with cards. And as I left his house and I was driving, I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if I can, tap into Patrick Swayze again here. And Patrick Swayze appeared and was, just sort of stood there. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do anymore. Now that you're here, I don't.
You're like, hello, can you lift me? Don't put me in the corner.
He was just stood there. And then the next thing, someone else came in to the vision. And I knew that I recognized the person. I knew that they were famous, but I couldn't think who it was. And then it clicked that they were in a band, and he said it was. I thought he said Lester Bennington. It was Chester Bennington, from Lincoln Park. So that was when it all really, really started for me, and I came away from using cards, and I was just connecting at a drop of a hat. It was as though someone had flicked a switch.
Mm. It does feel
Like
like that,
it
doesn't it?
literally,
Yeah.
they turned the lights on, and then that was it. And that was my journey of then really starting to build up the trust. Because you're battling with, is this my imagination or am I really seeing this?
Yes.
Is this real or am I having a psychosis? We're constantly like battling because what we're doing and the things that I'm seeing and the people that I'm speaking to, so many people would just say to me, Gemma, are you okay? Do we need to bring you to the doctor? Like, it's just so, it just defies logic. So that was my journey. It was a bit of a let's
I
explore the
love that
cards.
so much.
Let's.
But I feel like it's almost like spirit pushing you over the edge, right? Like when you get to those points, and it's almost like you've made yourself like a handicap accidentally because you were
Mhm.
like, no, I need the cards to do anything, but you actually don't.
Yeah,
Even, I do oracle card readings, but I don't need the book. I just use the card, and then from
yeah,
the card, I can get the whole story. And In all honesty, I don't need the card, but the card just helps people sometimes have a
It's
concrete,
the, it's
right?
the
Have a
comfort.
concrete thing to look at. Yeah. Especially because it's really hard sometimes when you can see what's coming through and they can't see it. So sometimes having that
Yeah,
card there, and you would have found that with tarot too, right? Like it's
yeah.
just, yeah.
Well, what I had started off with a tarot deck, and then I bought some oracle cards as well. And what I would have done, because I was very nervous whenever I first started to do readings, because you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, what if nothing comes through? What if nobody turns up and I can't get any information? What if I get it wrong? All of these fears. So whenever I first started using the cards, I would have held the card and looked at something, and it would have just triggered a vision. So that was how I started to use the cards after I'd went through my stage of looking through and trying to figure out what the, interpretation was based on the book. So I would have looked at the card and seen what vision was triggered. And then I maybe would have had a word or two in with that. Now, once I started to come away from the cards, I always would have kept the cards next to me so that if I started to get nervous, as soon as I got nervous, my connection started to shut off. So once I started to get nervous, and that would happen sometimes if I give information and I can see that they're just looking blank. And then I'm starting to think, oh my gosh, I'm a fraud. And it just starts shutting down. And I always would have kept the cards next to me to reach for. It just gave me that moment of like, okay, let's just lean on this a little bit. We know what we're doing here. And it would have just started the thing off again. But being able to come away from the cards completely was such a not a relief, but it felt liberating, but it was really exciting to think that I could connect to anyone, anywhere, at any time and give a message. Like I was on a radio show and the radio host had just put me on the spot and asked me something. Well, do you have anything for me? And oh, but I was just able to do it
Boom.
just instantly. And I was seeing him testing a car, like, sitting in a new car, testing it all out. And he was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. He says, I'm just waiting to get the keys for my new car. So I was just pleased that it worked. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey. But when people see me online now, or they're, having a session with me, or they see me working, I think it can be amazing for people to see. But I think it's really important that people know that I didn't just wake up like this and start here. I had to start with the nerves and the battling with the fear and knowing that I'm looking at a card and I'm thinking, is this really what I'm seeing? Is this really the information that I'm getting? So I've had to go through all of that in order to get to the stage where I'm as confident as as I am today.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting you say that because it brought up this memory. So, when I was working with my spiritual mentor, she said this thing. It's like she gets a pre intuitive hit, like almost before she goes to start a session, she'll already know what's going to happen because she gets like a almost kind of like a pre download. It's like, when you want to get a movie ready, you might just set it up and then pause it so it can scrub, and
Mm-hmm.
then you press play. So it's kind of like you get this initial intuitive hit. And I know personally what you were saying about like the fears and the doubts and everything. Mine is always like, because I kind of get that pre-intuition. I'm always like, hang on, is this my opinion that's coming through? Is this my ego trying to weigh on this? Or is
Yeah,
this actually what's happening for that person? And it can be really hard in that moment to use that discernment. And that's why I like when you were saying you still had your cards there just in case, because sometimes it's like, wow, this is really what I was thinking for this person, but is this really what I was thinking? Or is this,
yeah.
what I was getting coming through?
I can remember one of the most profound readings that I ever done, because not everything I do is in person or over Zoom. I used to offer a lot of email readings where people would just submit one question via my website and they'd pay for it and it would land in my inbox and then I'd respond. And one of them had come from a woman over in the US. It wasn't anybody that I knew. It wasn't anybody that I had read for before. Um, and she was asking when she was going to get pregnant. And I wasn't saying that she was going to get pregnant. So that in itself is quite challenging information to go back to someone with, especially when it's over email. Because for one, I'm thinking, gosh, I'm about to shatter this woman's world. But am I right? Is this, am I sure? Am I certain that this is the information that I'm getting? And I was absolutely certain. I had asked it in so many different ways. I probably had lifted a deck of cards and leaned on those as well. I had even slept on it and asked again the next day. But I was being told that no, she wasn't going to get pregnant and that there was something preventing that, something that was unclear. And she replied to the email to say, well, there's another two psychics have said that I am. And I think one had said she was going to get pregnant in a month. And the other one had said, oh, 3 months. So immediately I'm doubting myself because I'm thinking, well, these other two psychics have both seen her getting pregnant. Why am I not? Am I getting the wrong information? Is there something that's not clear? Um, but I sat down and I sat down with my guide. I have one particular guide that I would work with for to bring information through for those readings. And I I was being told that there was something gynecologically that wasn't
She was gonna
uncovered
not
yet.
gonna, yeah.
And she needed to get clarity on that, but there was something going on beneath the surface because she'd had her bloods and everything done and everything was fine. Her husband had been checked. So I was saying I was being told within 6 months that she would have more clarity, but that there was something else going on that she didn't know about. And it was one that I had always wondered about. And I, had really wanted for my own validation to almost reach out and ask her, like, whatever happened with that? Like, is it like, did you get pregnant? Did you not? Am I wrong? Or, what is going on? And I thought, well, no, I can't do that. That's a complete invasion of her privacy. And I just tried to move on past it and just, continued on with my work. And I had an email just land in my inbox one day. And again, I hadn't recognized who it was from, but she says, oh, it's almost 6 months to the day that you give me a reading. And when I looked back, it was her. And what had actually happened was she had had surgery, and it turned out that they had discovered she had endometriosis. I think the surgery was for her stomach,
Mm.
her digestive system. And while they were in there was part of her, it was either her bowel or her intestine was fused on to her womb because she had severe endometriosis and didn't know. And it was all leaning on a fallopian tube, and her fallopian tube was blocked.
So she
So
couldn't
all of
get
this
pregnant.
together was preventing her from getting pregnant. So it was just that I can remember that because that was quite early on in my journey. And that just blew my mind. I just was like, wow.
I I had such a similar experience, Gemma. So I was working with this person, and her sister-in-law had gifted her a session, and we were doing this beautiful meditation. And I said, my throat chakra is really blocked with you. I said, what are you not speaking your truth or something? And she goes, I'm actually a singer. Like, she was a professional singer, and I had no idea. And I said, this doesn't make sense for someone that's a professional singer. Your throat shouldn't feel like this. And then it just stuck in my head and I couldn't figure out what it was. And anyway, and then a few months later, her sister-in-law said to me, oh yeah, they found out she had a massive thyroid issue, and that's what I was feeling in the throat, but I didn't know at the time. And she said, she actually went in to test if she could get pregnant. And then all these thyroid things came up, and I was like, oh, that is so interesting, because I said, thank you. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, you just gave me so much clarity what I was feeling in that moment, because there was this just mismatch of energy and I couldn't figure out what it was, and like you said, it's just like that, like, hang on a
Yeah.
minute, this doesn't make sense, because it was like I was losing my voice. I'm like, it was so powerful how blocked this thyroid gland was. But
Yeah.
later, it's funny because if I would have met her 3 months later, I probably would have figured it out a bit quicker. But again, that's part of our journey, right?
Well, exactly. And I always say as well, even the times that we do feel like we have got it wrong, and that person is looking at us blankly, or they're like, no, no, we have to have experiences like that as well to build our resilience. Because
Mm.
what's going to happen if we're put into a room of, people, hundreds of people potentially, we're on stage and we're giving a reading or we're giving a message to someone and they're looking at us like, no, 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 and we're crumbling. Like, it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey to inner trust, to trusting the higher power, and also to be able to deal with the knocks that come along with this path as well. So everything that happens always happens for a reason. It always serves a purpose. And also, one of the big things is that sometimes we're giving a message to a person that isn't ready to hear it, or that isn't aware of the thing themselves. So it's not even that we're wrong, it's just that that person isn't aware, and we're bringing it to their awareness, and we don't trust ourselves enough to know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's funny because so one of my gifts is I can see a person's highest timeline and like how they can get there, but I can't always tell them what their highest timeline looks like because they're not ready for it. I can say
Mm-hmm.
like what they need to know at that moment, but I can't tell them where to go. And this happened for a friend, like a close friend of ours, like my husband and me, and I was like, this is so hard because I just want to say, all you have to do is this, and then your dream life is there. And, but I couldn't say it in that way. I had to say it in the way that that person needed to hear it at that time. And like you said, it is very testing because you're like, all right, I know there's a process. And I know if I hadn't done it that way, I would have robbed them of their ability to go through the lessons they needed to go through to get to that point. And still at the moment where we're recording this, I can still see the same cycle and the same problem. And it's like, just step out of it, just step out of it. But at the same time, it's their journey and they'll get
Yeah,
there when they're ready.
yeah,
Hopefully, hopefully.
yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing that's actually really hard, I think, as well, when we're on this journey, whether we're giving readings or we're doing coaching, we can become invested because we want the people to see, like, we want to make their lives easier, we want to make it all better, but ultimately it is their journey. So although we're seeing it and we're telling them, well, this is going to happen, it's like I used to do a lot of love readings. That was really how I started off. And I had so many people, and I would have been saying, no, this isn't your person. But they would have been so determined to make it work. And no, it's not your person. Like, stop it. But it was so
Stop
hard for me.
it.
It's like part of me just had to learn to just let people live their lives. I can plant the seed, but it's up to them to then
Yeah.
choose the path.
Exactly. And it's part of our spiritual responsibility, right? As like these people that can hold the space and get that information through, that we need to go, okay, we are just telling them what they need right here for right now for their part
Yeah.
of their soul journey that they're on. And hopefully, like you said, we planted enough seeds that then they will go, oh, there's another path. And then they'll come back and go, hey, remember when you said that? I did it finally. And you're like, yay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. But yeah, it's all part of the journey. All part of the journey.
So I have to ask because all I can hear in my head is Dirty Dancing at the moment. Does Patrick, does he come to you often, Patrick Swayze and Chester
he
from
he
Linkin
just
Park?
not constantly, but he has come back quite a few times. So I'd watched a documentary, I think it was on like Sky or Netflix or something, and I had watched a documentary about him, and he come and he sat with me to watch that, and he would have been giving me little bits of information before it then would have been confirmed in the documentary. Sometimes he'll just come through to just have a bit of like lighthearted like banter and fun. But I don't see him a lot. I see Chester all the time. Chester's with me every day, but Patrick does come through a little bit. And George Michael is another one.
I love that.
Yeah.
that. That explains what's happening in my head right now.
Yeah.
It's like this mismatch of music, and I'm like, what is this? Linkin Park, George
Yeah.
Michael, and some Dirty
Yeah.
Dancing.
It's so funny because it's like they have their own little world going on. And I can remember even one day that I was driving along and George and Chester got into the car and they're sitting talking about should we do a collaboration? Like we'll make them and they're sitting jotting down lists. So it's like, well, okay, fine.
It's so funny you say that, Gemma, because I have weird things happen to me when I'm driving in the car as well. And it's so it sounds really weird. I'm just going to throw it out there because why not? I'm just going to just do it. So one of my high council people, like for anyone curious, like anyway, there's like a 12 high council you can kind of talk to. And one of the people and energies on it is death, right? So I talk to death a lot and it sounds really weird. But the first time death showed up, it was in my car. So I'm like, is this an omen? I'm driving to work. Death is there in my car.
Is
And
it a
I
song?
was like, I don't want to die. I have so much left to do in this world. And he's like, because it was like a male energy, right? He's like, yeah, I know you don't want to die. I said, I'm not afraid of dying. He goes, no, there's a difference. There's a difference of being afraid of dying versus, you want to die. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, look, sometimes you have to go through the death to experience the rebirth. And that's, such a big thing. We all go through the death of so many parts of our identities and everything. And then death puts his hand on my heart and is giving me love. So I'm there driving to work with death having his hand on my heart, sending me love. And I'm like, this is the weirdest experience of my life. Death has my heart in his hand. And I'm just here driving to work like, okay. Because it was I had no words. And I'm just like, and I get home and I go to my husband, I had the weirdest thing happen today, but I couldn't fully tell him because I'm like, there's no way. And people are probably listening to this episode going, wow, we never knew this about Catherine. She's truly crazy. Yes, I am spiritually crazy. I'm
Yeah.
not going to deny
Honestly,
it.
the amount of stuff that I have experienced, I would never say anybody is crazy. Even the people who are typically like crazy and are on medication for it and are, in an institution, I seriously think that there's just some form of crazy, out there spiritual gift happening with a lot of them.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I was at work one day and there was like these noises and I looked at my clients and I'm like, can you hear something? And they actually knew that I do other things. They're like, yeah, we can hear that. It's okay. And I'm like, oh, okay. Can you hear the singing? They're like, what's singing? I was like, okay. No, don't worry. It's tuned in later. No worries. There's just a ghost in the building. It's okay. But we actually had this really angry spirit in the office. And I came in, it was after Christmas. I know it was a few years ago. And I had like this just like lolly jar that no one really wanted. So I brought it in because I thought maybe some of the staff might want it or whatever. Anyway, and I put it on the desk and this spirit threw it across the room and it smashed on the wall. And I was like, oh, what is going on here? And we had these name plaques in the hallway and it had like each of the therapists' names that was working there. And all of them had been smashed off the wall except for mine and one other person. And she's also a bit spiritual as well. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And so then I was talking to the other staff there that day and I was like, we have an angry ghost. They're like, oh, yes, who's been doing this, is doing this. And then our boss walks in and I said, there's an angry ghost. He goes, oh no, it's just because they're building next door. It's just shaking things up. Well, it turns out he was right because the building next door had shaken up all the energies in the land, right? Which is why the angry ghost was there in the first place. But he said, and then we're all three of us are there going, there is an angry ghost in here. He's like, and I said, he goes, and I said, I can get rid of that. I just need your permission. He goes, what do you mean? I said, just tell me I can get rid of him. Like, gave me the permission. He's like, okay. Anyway, it turned it out on this big initiation thing for me and this big event. But the whole funny thing was that it was just like the three of us are sitting there going, there's a ghost in here. It's just like, but
I love stories like that.
great. And they're great. It's good when it's not just one of you. Like when there was three of
Yeah,
us all going, there's something in here, and when someone then logically tries to explain it away and you're like, like there's no way the shaking of the building could have thrown something across the room and that sort of
yeah,
thing. So yeah, which is really interesting.
yeah.
What is the craziest prophetic message you have gotten?
Oh my gosh, there's been so many.
Just pick the
There's
one that
been
comes to the top of your
so
head.
many. Well, I don't know. I'm really drawn to war. War, a big war, is one of the craziest ones that I have got. And I was told at the time that it was coming at Christmas. This was a few years ago. A big war Christmas, including the UK, the US, Europe. And I had thought, with my lack of exposure, I guess, to timelines at that time, I had thought, oh, it's happening this Christmas. And I've come to realize, no, it's not happening just yet, but it is coming, and it is coming soon. Um, so that's one of the craziest ones. So sorry for anybody that's listening that might be feeling a little bit scared about that. It's not something to be scared of. It's like a cleansing that's happening. There's a lot of good things that come with this. But that's definitely one of the more out there things that I've experienced. Like whenever it's something that's quite heavy for the collective. I've just completely changed the tone of the podcast.
No,
Um,
it's okay.
so that's definitely one of the crazier ones. I've had so many crazy out there. I can remember sitting one day and I was actually recording a podcast, and the spirit of Bill Paxton came through. Bill Paxton, for anybody who isn't aware, is an actor. He was in Twister. He was in Titanic. He was the guy that was leading the Titanic in the movie, in James Cameron's movie, to search for the heart-shaped diamond. And he was sort of leading the expedition. And he had come through during this podcast, and he was talking about something that was going to happen. He kept talking about the Titanic. He kept referencing the Titanic and was showing
Mm.
me a boat smaller than the Titanic that would have people on board. And he showed me it sinking. He kept saying submerge, submerge, and it sank and it hit the bottom. And I knew that there was going to be lives lost with this. And I can remember not even really thinking about it, but I posted that particular clip on TikTok. And it was 3 months later that the Titan sub disaster happened. And Bill Paxton had actually even been down to the Titanic himself, in a submersible vehicle. So he had been to the Titanic, he'd been in the movie about the Titanic, he kept talking about the Titanic. So stuff like that is like just blows my mind. Blows
Yeah,
my
which is
mind.
so amazing. It's just, and like you said, the timeline thing, it gets me too. Especially because timelines can shift and change, especially because we all have free will. So, and I
Yeah.
have got a friend who does Akashic record reading. She's actually been on the show, Sabrina, a few many, many episodes ago, but that's the biggest thing she says. Like, she'll get information, but then the timeline will shift. It'll
Yeah.
push it back, or it'll change, or it'll shift and everything. And it doesn't mean that the information was incorrect. It just means something has shifted in that timeline to prevent it from happening when you initially thought it was. So it's really,
Yeah.
really interesting how the quantum realm works.
Yeah. Yeah. I can remember, that I'd mentioned about the guy that I was obsessed with and I was doing cards about, and he moved back home. He was here doing his PhD, which is how I met him. And he had moved home, but I was always told that I thought he was my person, but I was always told that he would come back into my life. And I was told that he would come back at Easter. So again, I was thinking, oh, like it'll be this Easter. I wasn't thinking it will be an Easter. I was thinking it'll be this Easter. And this is about 4 or 5 years ago. And then he moved back home. We lost contact. He moved back home. I'm looking at my, screen on my phone and his Facebook, and I can see that he's, back home, and I'm enraged. Why have you lied to me? Rah! And yeah, bumped into him a few weeks ago at Easter. He's just So it wasn't Easter. It just wasn't the Easter that I thought it was going to be. So yeah.
I know, timeline. Well, also too, like my guides very rarely give me timelines. Very, very rarely. And if they do, they're like, soon. I was like, what soon? They're like, soon.
I'm told that as well soon,
Soon.
and it's like three and a
Soon.
half years.
And then I'm like, a year? Soon.
Yeah. Well, so
So
far
I'm
I
glad
have
it's not
seen,
just
well,
me.
this is short duration to me, so I don't get soon. I get told short duration. It's the same thing. So instead of giving me an actual timeline, they'll say a short duration. It'll be in a short duration, and I have seen that to be as much as 3.5 years so far. So, but then I've seen it be as quick as like a couple of days or a couple of weeks. But their sense of time is very, very different to ours. But I also recognize that we're being taught to loosen our grip on outcomes, and
Divine
let's,
timing.
not be putting attention towards that. Let things unfurl when they're supposed to unfurl.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
I guess we should probably stop talking at some point. I like
Part
so
3 of the
I know
podcast with
we would just
Gemma
keep talking.
Lonsdale.
Hi everyone, welcome to Willow Healing, and today's episode is going for a whole day. No. Dear. All right, so Gemma, when I get people on, when we start to finish up, I ask if they could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
I would help people see their own traumas, help them realize that they have so much more healing to do than what they're aware of. Because if we knew that, if we knew how much stuff we were carrying around with us energetically and repressing, we would be so eager to get the work done and shift it all off in order to lighten our load and live the life that we want to live.
Yeah, and it's when you do the work that you do become more in touch with your intuition and your spiritual gifts,
Yeah,
because like we started, it's like our full circle, right? Because that's what we started
yeah.
about talking about, which is everyone has them.
Yeah. But also, I think we get so consumed with life that we don't realize, we lose touch with our inner self. Like we lose touch with our spirit, I guess is probably the right word. And we think we're so much more healed than what we are. And I've even seen it on my own journey as well. It's not that I'm just witnessing it in other people. I've witnessed it in my own, where I think, oh, finally it's done. I'm like, and then something else comes up and I'm thinking, well, gosh, I thought I had dealt with this, but we're just going a little bit deeper. Or so yeah,
Next
there's
layer.
always stuff to be done. So if people realize that they weren't as fine as what they thought they were, then they would just be so much better off, so much happier.
Exactly. No. And how can people find you, Gemma?
So they can find me online. My website is gemmalonsdale.guru, and I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok. It's Gemma Lonsdale Guru on there as well, and the same for YouTube. And I also have my book out, book plug. So it can be bought
Exciting.
on Amazon. So it's Wisdom Proverbs for Today, and it's available on hardback, paperback, and also on Kindle. And it's on Kindle Unlimited as well for anybody that has Kindle Unlimited.
I
So
do.
yeah.
I do.
Hey, there you go. And you
I
can go
will
and read
read
my
it
book.
and review it for you. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's how people can find me.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much this has been so much fun, Gemma. Like, it's just been a delight.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.